Everyday Damage MMA Show. I'm Lewis Bell. This is a brand new YouTube channel. You are going to come here for everything that is going on in combat sports. Obviously, like I said, brand new. Give me some time to get the branding together, make it look more professional, make it look all nice. But this is the first video. UFC 310 is this weekend. So we're going to do a little bit of a UFC 310 breakdown. I know Pantoja and Kai Asakura are the main event. I'm going to start with Shavkat versus Ian Gary here, right? Shavkat Rakhmonov, the boogeyman of the welterweight division. We thought it was going to be Hamzat. It's Shavkat. Shavkat has been rolling through everybody. His last fight was against Wonderboy a year ago. And he's taking on Ian Gary. Ian Gary was supposed to fight Joaquin Buckley. Ian Gary ends up getting pulled from that fight and steps up to fight Shavkat because Belal Muhammad got staph infection in his foot. Very nasty. Belal seems like he's going to be out for about 2 months. So now we got Shavkat versus Ian Gary. All right, let's start with Shavkat. Shavkat is, the way I like to compare him, he's like a more patient Hamzat Chimaev in a lot of ways, right? Very well rounded, very good on the feet. Obviously, his biggest strong point is his wrestling and his grappling. Um, how is that going to go against Ian Gary? Ian Gary is a guy who likes to keep the distance. He likes to kind of keep you at kicking range and stay at a very long distance where he can pick you off and kind of snipe you a bit. But he's fighting Shavkat, who is just someone who's going to come forward nonstop and apply pressure until he gets the fight where he wants to get it, right? Shavkat, we saw him break down Jeff Neal. That was a bit of a war, but he ended up getting like that side rear naked choke standing and putting Jeff Neal to sleep. And then after that, he ended up breaking Wonderboy down over the course of, I think, 2 rounds, and then he got the rear naked choke in the third. So Shavkat is a guy who, yes, he is super dangerous and will finish you, but he takes his time and breaks you down over the course of a round or two until he finds his opportunity. Ian Gary, on the other hand, like I said, he likes to snipe, he likes to stay at long distance, okay? We saw his last time out was against Michael Venom Page. He kind of got not beat up on the feet, but MVP, I feel like, got the better of him overall on the feet. So Ian Gary went to plan B and made it a grappling match. He ended up getting MVP's back for long stretches of time. I don't think he is going to be able to do that against Shavkat Rakhmonov, right? Shavkat is too good. He's not going to be able to grapple with Shavkat. Personally, I think this is a little bit early for Ian Gary, right? Ian is I think he's only 27, okay? And he's been beating everybody, pretty decisively, but they haven't been the most like impactful wins, I would say. Whereas Shavkat, he's out there finishing everybody. I'm pretty sure Shavkat is 18-0 with 18 finishes. Um, but Ian Gary is just, a gangster for taking this fight. The story goes that this fight was offered to everybody in the top 5 of the welterweight division, and they all turned it down. I thought we were going to get the Usman fight, but Usman didn't want it on this short of notice. So Ian Gary deserves this, right? He's the only one who stepped up to take this fight. He gets a lot of shit for his personal life and what people think about that. I mean, it's pretty funny, but none of our business, obviously. It's just about what he can do in the cage. And for him to take this fight on short notice really says a lot about him and where he believes he's at. He thinks he's ready for this opportunity, and we're going to find out. I lean towards Shavkat because Shavkat, I feel like, has proven more, and Shavkat's finishing these guys, right? I mean, the way he took out Jeff Neal, the way he took out Wonderboy. There's a lot of unanswered questions about Ian Gary. We haven't seen him really put in the fire against an elite guy. He had that fight, I think it was one of his like first two fights in the UFC where he got dropped very badly, and then he ended up coming back and finishing the guy. Um, but it's different when you're going up against elite competition. If we would have seen him fight someone like a Sean Brady, like a Jack Della, a Gilbert Burns, all those guys, the vets of the division who have been there, and if we could have seen someone give Ian some pushback and bring him to some deep waters, we know a bit more what he's made of and what he can do against the elite of the division. But that didn't happen against Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal wasn't really able to make it a dogfight, and that also didn't happen against MVP. MVP, really just got out grappled for 75% of that fight, and we didn't find out anything as far as what happens when you push Ian Gary out of his comfort zone. If you let him keep the fight at a slow pace where he can pick you off from distance, he's probably going to win most of those fights. But that's not what's going to happen against Shavkat. Shavkat is going to push the pace. Shavkat is going to take him into deep waters. If Ian Gary wins this fight, it's going to be a war. He's really going to have to show what he's made of. And I want to find that out. I think the Buckley fight would have been a great step for Ian, because I do think Buckley he's also at a point in his career where it's very pivotal for him, and he would have really pushed the pace and tried to get inside on Ian and not played that game with him. But then again, Ian could have done the same thing to him. So we're going to get a lot of questions answered as far as where is Ian at, how great is Shavkat, and I do like this fight a lot on paper, even though I do think it's a little early for Ian. It's a great fight. You can't complain, and you can't say shit about Ian Gary at this point. And I think both of these guys are going to give Belal a great fight, but I definitely do lean Shavkat. The next fight on this card is Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov. Before that, let's do Pantoja and Kaya Sakura, right? Pantoja, he's on a roll. Let me pull up his record here. Give me 1 second. Obviously, we know about the fights with Brandon Moreno. Let's see. I want to get a full view of his last couple fights. Okay, Pantoja is on a 6-fight win streak. He has not lost since 2020 against Askar Askarov. Okay, after that he beat Manel Kape, Brandon Royval, Alex Perez, took the belt from Brandon Moreno, defended against Brandon Moreno, and then beat Steve Erceg back in May earlier this year. Pantoja is just a dog, man. Pantoja, every time he fought Brandon Moreno, I picked against him. And those fights were, very, very close and probably could have gone either way, but on rewatch, I scored them for Pantoja. I felt like Brandon Moreno is just a very slick and clean boxer, but that didn't matter. Pantoja is a dog and was able to make it a dogfight. Then after that, he defends the belt against Brandon Royval. Brandon Royval gave him a great fight, but again, I think Pantoja pretty clearly beat him. And then you have the Steve Erceg fight. Pantoja, I think that fight was, from what I remember, it was pretty close going into the 5th, and Pantoja just did what champions do, and he took that fight over, and it was pretty clear that he won that fight after that 5th round. I think that's the biggest story here, is that every time someone knocks on that door to try and take that belt from Pantoja, he just slams it in their face. Every time you pick against him and think this is going to be the guy to do it, Pantoja, he's really good. He's a little older. He's good, but I don't think he's great. Every time we say that, he slams the door in their face of whoever we think is going to take that belt from him. Kaya Sakura. I will admit I don't know the most about Kaya Sakura before he got signed to the UFC. Um, I know he has a win over Juan Archuleta. Okay, that was his last fight, December of last year. Okay, so going off that, I mean, he TKO'd him. And Juan Archuleta, if you're not a fan of Bellator or MMA outside of the UFC, Juan Archuleta is a great fighter. He would probably be top 10 in the UFC for sure. Very fast paced guy. Trains with TJ Dillashaw, or when TJ Dillashaw was fighting, he trained with TJ Dillashaw. That's a great win. From what I know, Kai is a striker mainly. He's well rounded, but he likes to keep it on the feet, and he's very fast paced, action oriented. And I hear that, and I see that, and I saw pieces of the Archuleta fight, and that just makes me think he's gonna play more into Pantoja's game. All these guys think they're just gonna push Pantoja back and get in his face and outstrike him, and then it turns into a war, and Pantoja comes out on top. Um, I think Pantoja, he's the best guy in that division right now. Kaya Sakura, he's 31. He's got a bright future in the UFC potentially. Only 4 losses. I just don't think. I don't think he's gonna beat Pantoja. This is his first fight in the UFC too. Your first fight in the UFC, you have to take on the best flyweight in the world, who has been in the trenches of the UFC for years. Um, it's a tough ask, you know. Guys don't really get title shots in their first fight. He is. UFC jitters, and you got to fight Pantoja. Uh, I don't like how that has the potential to play out for him. I'm definitely leaning towards Pantoja. Anything can happen in these flyweight fights, right? These guys have put on some of the best fights in the last couple years. That whole mix of Royval, Pantoja, Brandon Moreno, these guys have put on some of like the most classic fights. And then if you go back before that, when you had Figueiredo in there, um, Davison, who's now at bantamweight. Flyweight's been one of the most fun divisions for the last few years now. But I'm definitely leaning Pantoja. Um, I think it's just this fight's gonna come down to grit and who's gonna dog it out, and I'm gonna pick Pantoja every time uh, that it comes to that. Next on the card, we have Cyril Gahn and Alexander Volkov. Um, this is a rematch of their first fight from a few years ago. Cyril Gahn won that. I'm pretty sure he got the decision. Hold on. Let me check that. I remember he beat Volkov. I'm trying to get some. Okay, that fight was back in 2021. Yeah, he beat Volkov by decision. From what I remember, it was pretty decisive too. But I think this is a different Volkov. I think Volkov is kind of hitting his stride right now, and he's looked good in a lot of these past couple fights. Um, Cyril Gahn, though, before the Francis and John fight, Cyril Gahn, people forget, like, he was so highly touted and was presented to us as the next generation of heavyweights, a guy who is super light on his feet. He appeared to be very well rounded. He got a couple submission wins early in his career. but we saw, in the Francis and John fight that his grappling was a very big hole. Not something that I think Volkov is going to take advantage of. Um, but just to go more into the narrative of how great Cyril Gahn was, at least that's how he was being presented to us. A lot of people now really don't like him or aren't very high on him because of the Francis and John fight, and I understand that you're winning the Francis fight, right? And then Francis turns into Habib and takes you down repeatedly for the last 3 rounds of that fight. You in the fifth round you go for a heel hook and Francis gets on top of you and rides you out and beats you. You would think going into that John fight he would have done a lot of work on his grappling and made adjustments, but John easily got the mounted guillotine up against the cage and got the win over Cyril. So Cyril's at a point. I think that was his last fight, right? Cyril has not fought since the John Jones fight, right? Let me see. Oh no, okay. He lost to John and then he came back later last year and he beat Sergey Spivak. That was in France. Um, Sergey Spivak is solid, but I think Volkov is a lot better than Sergey Spivak, and obviously Volkov's been around for a long time. Volkov used to be a champion in Bellator before he came to the UFC. Um, the way I see this fight going, though, similar to the first fight, I think Volkov will do a bit better because he'll make some adjustments that will help him do better on the feet. I don't really see Surreal mixing it up too much unless he's evolved a lot in a year, which is possible. Like I said, the potential that Surreal had when he first came into the UFC, we were thinking that he was going to be reigning over this division for a long time. People forget that because of the two shitty performances, but that's just the truth. He was presented as the next generation heavyweight, but I think he more or less picks Volkov apart on the feet, and I'm gonna say he gets another decision win over Volkov. This one's gonna be 3 rounds instead of five, so Volkov is gonna have a lot less time to put stuff together. He's gonna have to start a little bit faster if he wants to win this fight. The other thing is he's got to cut off the cage. He's got to bring the fight to Gahn because Gahn will just do what he does with his karate stance, kind of darting in and out and picking guys apart with the leg kicks, the jabs. He likes to pop shot a lot and get in and out, dart in range and then dart back out. Volkov can't. Volkov is the slower, bigger guy. He can't just stand there and let Cyril Gahn dart in and out of range on him. He's got to push the action and cut the cage off and get to Gahn before Gahn can get to him. Do I think he's going to do that? I think he's going to do better, but I still think Cyril Gahn is going to win a 3 round decision, probably. As boring as that sounds. Next fight on the card. What do we got? Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. Bryce Mitchell hasn't fought since he got fucking demolished by Josh Emmett. That was bad. Watching that live and seeing Bryce Mitchell seize up like that and look like he was having a seizure in the cage was very scary. Bryce Mitchell, he needs to kind of get his game together and evolve it. He relies so much just on his grappling. A lot of guys do, but he really doesn't have a plan B after that. If a guy stuffs his shots, if he can't get a guy down, I mean, we saw this against Ilya Taporia. We've seen this against a few guys where he just can't get his grappling going, and then the fight's over from there. He ends up getting picked apart on the feet, or he gets put out. And that Josh Emmett one was brutal. He's taken a year off, which I think is necessary. I mean, you do not want to come back too quick after a fight like that. And the thing is, he's taken on Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie hasn't been the best in MMA. He is only 5-2. The last time I remember Kron fighting was against Cub Swanson. Like, what was that? Probably 4, 5 years ago at this point. And Cub absolutely picked him apart for 5 rounds and got an easy win over him. Bryce's A game is his jiu-jitsu. I don't know how that's going to go against Kron. It's going to be a fun fight because both these guys are going to be trying to submit each other. And I do think it'll kind of be like a fast-paced grappling match, which will be fun. But, I mean, I think I'm going to go Kron here, right? If you're Bryce Mitchell, Kron, if you don't know much about Kron is, one of, at a certain point, he was one of the best grapplers of this generation. Um, he still kind of hangs on to old school traditional ways of playing jiu-jitsu, which has hindered him a little bit with this newer generation of guys in jiu-jitsu. And as far as MMA, not super impressive, but he's fighting a guy who is going to play directly into his A game, and I think his A game is better than Bryce's. If you're going to go in there and have a grappling match with Kron Gracie and you're not like an amazing wrestler, then I'm going to rock with Kron on that one. After that, we have Nate Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi. Doo Ho Choi made his name off of that Cub Swanson fight a couple years ago, where I think that fight got inducted into the Hall of Fame, right? This is going to be fight of the night. 100% this is going to be fight of the night. Nate Landwehr is just, he's a train. That's his nickname, Nate the Train. The guy does not stop coming forward. Non-stop action every time he fights. And Doo Ho Choi, same thing. Doo Ho Choi does not really take steps back. It is going to be a head-on collision of two guys who want to knock each other out. It's going to be a fun fight. Not too much stakes involved, but you can't really make a better action fight on paper. Not two elite guys, but two guys who you know are going to bring it regardless of who they're fighting, right? And that's my UFC 310 breakdown. What else do we got going on? Leon Edwards is coming back and he's headlining the O2 Arena in England in March. Potential opponents for that. You have Jorge Masvidal coming back. Does it make sense for Leon as far as getting back to the belt? Absolutely not. It makes zero sense. Getting a win. Jorge is one of my favorite fighters of all time. Getting a win over Jorge at this point is not going to mean much. Now, if Jorge comes back and looks good against somebody and then you were to beat him, okay. But you're beating a Jorge who is coming off of like 4 straight losses, I think. The 2 Usman fights, the Colby fight, and then the Gilbert fight. That was his last fight, UFC 287 in Miami, I believe. That was his last fight, right? Yeah, he retired in Miami after the Gilbert fight. It's a grudge match. Jorge versus Leon. We all know the 3-piece in the soda from back in the day. That was when Jorge went on his run after knocking out Darren Till in England. Leon was on his undercard against Gunnar Nelson, I believe. Backstage, they had their altercation. Jorge busted him up. This is a grudge match 4 years in the making. Leon has obviously ascended to a height that Jorge never reached, winning the welterweight title, the 2 wins over Usman, and then the win over Colby Covington. Last time out, though, Leon looked super flat, headlining the card in England, got his belt taken by Bilal Muhammad. Leon is a very frustrating fighter for me to watch because he has so much talent and potential to be so much better. Not better than he is, but there's times where I watch him and I'm like, you should be taking this guy out right now. The Colby fight's a great example. Yes, he stuffed all of Colby's shots and he won 50-45, But if he wanted to finish Colby, I feel like he could have. There's times where he just needs to turn it on and he doesn't. And that Bilal fight was so frustrating because you keep on repeating the same mistakes. Um, and then also, you just don't string any combinations together. It's like you keep getting taken down, make an adjustment in the fight, and realize you can't be behind that black line with your back against the cage because Bilal has great cage wrestling and he's gonna get you down. Um, and Leon just he sits back too much and he's looking for that perfect shot like he did against Usman and it worked out, but he needs to put his combinations together more than that. I don't know if he's going to be able to win the belt again when you fight like that. It just seems like he has nights where things are not clicking. Even that second Usman fight in Utah, he came out super strong in that first round, won the first round, got Kamaru down, took Kamaru's back, and then the second through fourth round, it looked like a different fighter. He was just not pushing the pace, not putting any combinations together, letting Usman fight his fight, and then he couldn't get anything done, and it looked like he was going to be on the side of a 49-46 dominant decision, but he pulls the head kick out. But you're not going to get that every time out. You're not going to find that perfect shot. You need to set things up and you need to push the pace, as a striker on the feet at the elite level. And you have a lot of grapplers in this division who are not going to want to stand with you. You're going to have to set things up. You can't just sit back and look for the perfect shot. Back to the Masvidal fight for him. Would I like to see it? Yes, it would be fun. Every time Jorge fights, it feels like a big fight because Jorge has turned himself into a star. But being realistic, as far as being anything meaningful to the division, it's really not. Um, Jorge's just not at the same place in his career as he once was. Would I love for him to come back and look great? I would, but I don't. I don't think that is likely. Um, I'd rather us see Leon versus Sean Brady, Leon versus Jack Della. Um, let's look at the welterweight top 10. Um, there's just a lot more meaningful fights to the division than that Masvidal fight. That Masvidal fight should have happened 2, 3 years ago. Not right now. I mean, obviously Ian Gary's booked up. Um, Colby's booked up. We don't need to see Colby versus Leon. So I think you'd have the options of Sean Brady, Jack Della, um, maybe Gilbert. Um, if Joaquin Buckley beats Colby Covington and he wants to make a quick turnaround from December to March, uh, Joaquin Buckley versus Leon, that'd be a great fight. I would lean towards Sean Brady though. I think Sean Brady's been looking great. Obviously, last time out he had a dominant decision. It was a good fight, but it was a dominant decision over Gilbert Burns. And Sean Brady's kind of moving up and really showing where he's at ever since that Bilal loss. So I would say Sean Brady versus Leon. That's what I would like to see in the O2. Then obviously they could stack that card. Put Paddy on there, uh, put a couple other English UK fighters on there. They could put MVP on there. That's the other one. They might do MVP versus Leon, an all UK affair. That would be fun. But again, we just saw MVP lose dominantly to Ian Gary. I think Leon would probably follow a similar game plan and do the same thing. I don't think he would strike most of the fight with MVP. He'd definitely mix in the clinch and the grappling. Um, so I would go with Sean Brady on that one. Next up, Aspinall versus Jones negotiations have been going very well, apparently. Both sides have come out and said that they are in negotiations with the UFC. That's very early. The John Stipe fight just happened, so that's great to hear. Usually, like Dana had said, John likes to disappear and dip off for a while before coming back and sitting back down at the table to see what's next. We're so used to John taking so much time off. For us to hear that he's in negotiations and potentially this fight could happen in 6, 7, 8 months and not a year and a half, it's great to hear. John doesn't have very much time left. I think the sooner this fight happens, the better for him. But that's for another video. My opinion on the Aspinall and Jones saga situation. In other John Jones news, Francis Ngannou called him out on Twitter. It was like a very nice call out. Francis was saying like the best blessing we could get is Jones versus Ngannou. Would I love to see that fight? Absolutely. Do I think that that fight is going to happen? No, because the UFC is never going to co-promote with the PFL. Um, if you're a newer fan, you may not understand, but the UFC, they do not do business with other promotions. It's not like boxing where you have X fighter from this promoter and X fighter from this promoter, and then they come together and make the event. Dana doesn't do that. The UFC doesn't do that. If you're under their banner, then they'll make the fight. But if you're not, then you're not gonna fight one of their champions because the UFC has everything to lose in that situation. Why would they do that? At least from their perspective. Now, Francis apparently only has 2 fights left on his, or no, he has 1 fight left on his PFL contract, and then he's a free agent again. Would Dana sign Francis Ngannou back to the UFC? What do we think about that? I don't know. I think it would be great for business, and it would hype things up even more. That heavyweight division is very barren right now. You have John and you have Aspinall, and then you have everybody else. Um, Francis coming back to the UFC would be amazing. I would love to see it. It's just about if Dana and the UFC want to put their pride to the side and do what is best for the sport and for the fans. That trio right there of John, Francis, and Aspinall would be amazing. Other thing is they got to pay these guys. These guys, Francis and John especially. Aspinall's the younger guy on the rise who isn't as established, but Francis and John, they're gonna want that money. So we're gonna have to see how that plays out. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor. Uh, we've seen what's been happening. He was found civilly liable of sexual assault, I believe. Obviously, everyone has done their own research and come up with their own feelings about the case and what they think happened. We know what happened legally. Whether you believe he did it or not, Conor McGregor is at a point where he needs to change what he's doing in his life. Um, I think it's pretty clear to say the money has turned him into a different person than the guy that we knew in the public on his rise up. From the Aldo fight, the Eddie Alvarez fight, pre Floyd Mayweather fight, I think that was a very different guy before the hundreds of millions of dollars. Um, he's just handling all of this very poorly, right? Again, whether whether he knows he did it or not, um, you don't come out and continue to bash the person accusing you. You don't need to come out and apologize and say you did it, but you look at any other sport, um, you know, athletes get accused of something or found guilty of something. They put out a apology. They keep it very professional, and then they keep it moving, and they do good things to get the public back on their side. Um, Connor's just doing the opposite, and his fiance D Devlin's doing the opposite, and it just doesn't look good because you look bitter, and it's like the a lot of the public is tired of you, um, and they feel like you finally got what you deserved. So for you to keep coming out and bashing people, denying things, insulting people, it's just not a good look. You have the Hitman video game dropping him, you have Proper 12 dropping him. I don't know how Proper 12 thinks they're going to survive now because their whole thing was we have Conor McGregor here. Like, who the fuck is going to drink Proper 12 without Conor McGregor being attached to it? Um, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, Conor, he's just handling this terribly. Um, he's probably going to come back at some point, and the UFC is going to probably not touch on this at all, not talk about it, let things wash over. Um, and he'll come back, and I I don't want to see him come back, honestly. I think he's going to, but I don't want to see it. Like, it's going to be a washed up version of him. Very clearly, he cannot stay on the straight and narrow long enough to make it to a fight. Even before the Michael Chandler fight was supposed to happen, we saw the videos and images of him partying and doing the same things he's been doing. I don't want to see that guy in the cage. I would much rather see him clean his life up and stay away than throw himself into a fight buildup and come back, um, and get all the eyes on him again. Um, I just don't think it's a good look, but we'll have to see how it keeps playing out and see what happens. The PFL, over the weekend, they had the $1 million tournament for, I think it was 4 or 5 divisions. The PFL really needs to change something up because, myself included, a lot of people didn't even know this was happening. Like, they so poorly market their events, and it's like you did all these things to get Francis Ngannou. You have Jake Paul as your ambassador. I didn't hear about this event happening. Um, you are in no way going to compete with the UFC if you can't even market one of your biggest events. And that's the thing. Like, it's a great thing. You have 4 or 5 MMA fighters winning $1 million in a tournament. Like, that's big. That should be something that is marketed. That should be something that is talked about. I couldn't even tell you the winners. I know the one girl won it. Um, I know Brent Primus was in the finals and he lost. But PFL just sucks. They can't market for shit. I hope that changes with the Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov fight, because that fight should be huge. That fight should be marketed as Dagestan versus Ireland 2.0, Habib versus Connor 2.0. Like, they should build off of all of that history, but they're probably not going to, and it's a shame because they have so many great young up and coming fighters, um, but they just don't know how to market it to the public to make us even know what's going on. Boxing. I don't know if you guys have seen, but that super card for Riyadh season, February 22nd, that Turkey Al Sheikh is trying to put together, the main event of that card. This is just on paper right now. This is all subject to change, but this card's going to be massive. The main event of that card, Beterbiev versus Bivol rematch. The co-main event of that card, Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker. And then you're also going to have Shakur Stevenson on that card potentially, and Boots Ennis. That's got to be one of the top 2 or 3 greatest boxing cards of all time. What Turkey's doing is, like, amazing. To come into boxing and give us the fights that we want. We have Usyk versus Fury later this month, and the rumor that I saw is that the prize money is 190 million, with Usyk getting like 115 and Fury getting like 75. It's just amazing that this guy's coming in and throwing all this money to make the fights happen that we've been asking boxing to do for years. Excuse the fucking sirens in the background. I'm sorry. My setup is very low level, as you can hear, because we have a fucking ambulance going through the background. Sorry. Um, but yeah, Beterbiev. Oh, here it comes. Beterbiev versus Bivol, Dubois versus Parker. Um, those are two blockbuster fights in themselves, and that's the thing. Boxing traditionally, you have a great main event and then a shitty undercard. You might have a prospect on the undercard, but it's no fights that are substantial. Um, Turkey's coming in and he's changing the game. He's throwing so much money around that these guys are not able to turn it down, and they make the big fights happen. Sadly, all of them happen over in the Middle East, so a Fury fight really should be in England, but we're not getting that. But at least we're getting to see the fights regardless. Um, Fury versus Usyk 2. That's like probably my second most anticipated fight this year. My first was Topuria versus Holloway. I was so happy we got that fight when we did. But Usyk versus Fury 2. I'm leaning Usyk. I want to see if Fury makes those adjustments. That's going to be a great fight. I need to make another video on that. But yeah, the Riyadh Supercard, February 22nd, looks amazing. I can't wait to see the final product on paper. Like I said, we're probably going to have Shakur and Jaron Ennis on that card. There's a couple different opponents that they're talking about for that. That fight's going to be sick. Kermel Moten missing weight by 14 pounds this past weekend. Kermel Moten is a pretty huge prospect out of Floyd Mayweather's gym. They call him Baby Tank. He's looked very great. I think he's like 18, 19. But to be this young and to not have done anything and come in missing weight by 14 pounds, not a good look. Hopefully he can get that shit together. Maybe he needs to move up in weight. We'll see. That's all I've got on my notes. Let's see if there is any other fight news that is happening right now before I end this. I don't see anything. Guys, that is going to wrap it up for my first Everyday Damage show podcast breakdown. Like I said, Mondays is going to be a full rundown of everything that's going on in combat sports. I absolutely love this shit, and I've been around this game forever. Like my whole family has been around this, and I got brought up in it. So I decided I want to talk about it. TikTok, Everyday Damage as well. I post clips on there every day talking about fight news, but I really wanted to get into the long form on YouTube and help build an audience for myself. I love this shit. I can talk about it all day. Bear with me. I'm going to get better. It's going to look better. It's going to sound better. This is my very first video, right? I've got a fucking ring light, a fucking $30 microphone going off my MacBook with a webcam. I don't even have a real camera, okay? But it's about the content. It's about the content right now. The quality is going to get better. Obviously, I'm going to get better at breaking all this shit down. But this is the first one. I really want to push content out there. Mondays is going to be like I said, the show breaking down everything that's going on in combat sports from the past weekend and this current week. And then throughout the week, I want to post videos just touching on certain topics, breaking certain things down, whatever news and dramas out there. But thank you, whoever watches this. I hope you may have made it to the end. If not, skip to the end to hear me say thank you for watching. Everyday Damage, Lewis Bell. Thank you for watching.